Hey y'all, it's Miss Flores. So today we are going to learn how to simplify our fractions. Yesterday we learned when we should simplify fractions, whether or not fractions had a common factor that you could divide both numerator and denominator by, or if it didn't. Well, today we are only going to deal with the fractions that can be simplified, and we're going to learn how to do that. Alright, so when simplifying fractions, it's important that you need to find the greatest common factor of your numerator and denominator. So let's look at our first one, for example. We've got 16/24. So this fraction can be simplified. So our first step in simplifying, what we're going to do is we're going to find the factors of 16 and 24. So let's find those factors. So I'm going to make my t-chart for 16 and my t-chart for 24. 1 of 16 is 1 times 16. And now I could also do 2 times 8. And I could also do 4 times 4. 24, I can do 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. So I'm going to look at those list of factors, and I'm going to find the greatest one that they have in common. So they've got 2 in common, 4 in common, and 8 in common. But the greatest one they have in common is 8. So since 8 is their greatest common factor, what I can do is kind of like finding equivalent fractions when we were multiplying to make our numerator and denominator look larger, to have more pieces. We're going to do the opposite. So what I can do to simplify this is I can divide both numbers by 8. And the reason why this works is just like when we were finding equivalent fractions, right? Because when I divide by 8 over 8, I'm basically dividing my whole fraction by 1. So it does not change the value of this number. It just puts those pieces back together to where I have less pieces. So when I divide 16 by 8, I end up with 16 divided by 8 is 2. And then 24 divided by 8 is 3. So my simplified answer ends up being 2/3. So basically what we're doing when we are simplifying fractions is we are doing the exact opposite of what we were doing when we were finding equivalent fractions. These are still equivalent fractions because I could go in reverse and I could do 2 times 8 is 16, 3 times 8 is 24. They're still equivalent because of how we are dividing by 8 over 8. Since we're dividing numerator and denominator by the same number, it is keeping our fraction equivalent. It has the same value. It is just less pieces this time. Let's look at another one. All right, let's think about 7/49. So when we've got a numerator like 7, right? 7's prime. So when I make my t-charts, since 7's prime, my only multiplication that gets me 7 is 1 times 7, right? So I'm basically needing to make sure that 49 can also be divided by 7. That 7 times something is 49. Well, when I make my t-chart, I know 1 times 49 is 49. I also know that 7 times 7 is 49, right? So since they do have 7 in common, I can divide both of these numbers by 7. So I'll do 7 divided by 7. And I'll also do 49 divided by 7. Remember, this works because when I do 7 over 7, I'm basically dividing by 1. So it keeps it proportional, right? 7 over 7 is 1 whole. When I'm dividing by 1, my number stays the same. But since we're writing 1 a little differently, it changes the way my number looks. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. 49 divided by 7 is 7. So our simplified fraction is 1/7. Let's look at our next one. We've got 10/60ths. So our first step is to write our t-charts for 10 and 60. So I know 10 is 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. 60 is 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, and 6 times 10. So when I think about their common factors, they've got 2 in common, they've got 5 in common, and they've also got 10 in common. So if I wanted to simplify, I could simplify this fraction by any of these numbers, because they can both be divisible by 2, 5, and 10, but the fastest way to do it is to divide it by their greatest common factor, which would be 10, right? Because if I divided both these numbers by 2, or if I divided both these numbers by 5, I would still be left with a fraction that I can still simplify some more. So we're going to divide both these numbers by 10. Because remember, we're basically dividing our fraction by 10 over 10. So we are dividing it by 1. So our fraction is still equivalent. Our fraction is equivalent because we are dividing by 1. Our value is not changing. So 10 divided by 10 is 1. 6 divided by 10 is 6. So our simplified fraction ends up being 1/6. So 10/60ths is equivalent to 1/6. All right, let's look at 2 more. Let's look at 12/20ths. So first step is t-charts. We've got t-chart for 12. Oops, wrong one. T-chart for 12 and our t-chart for 20. Well, 12 is 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. It's important that you're writing all of the ways that you can multiply to get your number on your t-chart, so that way you don't end up forgetting their greatest common factor. 20 is 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and 4 times 5. So I'm going to look for all their common factors. They've got 2, 4, and that's all they've got in common, right? So the greatest of those 2 is going to be 4, right? Because I could divide both these numbers by 2, but I would still have to end up dividing them again. So I'm going to divide both of my numbers by 4, right? And so the reason why that works is because when I'm dividing by 4 over 4, I'm basically dividing by 1, right? So I can do 12 divided by 4 to get my new numerator, which is 3. And I can do 20 divided by 4 to get my new denominator, which is 5. So my simplified fraction is 3/5. You can always check to make sure that these fractions are simplified also, because I can look at 3/5 and I can say, okay, well, 3 is prime. 3 can only be divided by 3. 5 cannot be divided by 3. So since it cannot be simplified anymore, it is in simplest form. So 3/5 is 12/20ths in simplest form. These are equivalent fractions. Let's look at our last one together before we talk about our assignment. We've got 3/27ths. So let's make our t-charts. Well, 3, that'll be easy, right? 3 is prime. 3 can only get, you can only get 3 by doing 3 times 1, right? So that means when I'm making my t-chart for 27, I'm on the lookout for 3, right? Because it can only be divided by 3. Well, 3 can only be divided by 3. So 27 is 1 times 27. It is also 3 times 9. So 27 can be divided by 3, right? So when I do 3 divided by 3 to get my new numerator, 27 divided by 3 to get my new denominator. Remember, this works. Why? Because 3 over 3 is equivalent to 1. When I'm dividing by 1, I am not changing the value of this number. I am just changing the way it looks, right? So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 27 divided by 3 to get my new denominator is 9. So my final answer ends up being 1/9. I know that this is in simplest form, that this is simplified because I have a 1 as my numerator. Remember when we were talking about our rules yesterday? That if I've got 1 as my numerator, that it's definitely a fraction I can't simplify, right? Because 1 can only be divided by 1, and dividing by 1 isn't going to change anything. So 3/27 is equivalent to 1/9. All right, y'all. Here is our assignment for today. We have about 16 questions of fractions that we are going to simplify. So let's look at a couple of them. So 2/8. You notice it just says 2/8 is equal to, and your new fraction will go here. You will definitely need a scratch sheet of paper to write your T-charts on and to show your work on. So if I were to write out my T-charts for this, 2 is prime, right? So I could only do, let's write it over here. So if I do my T-charts for 2, whoops, I know that 2 is 1 times 2, right? Well, 8 can be divided by 2, right? When I do my T-chart for 8, I know 1 times 8, and I also know that I've got 2 times 4, right? So 2 will be the greatest common factor of 2 and 8. So let's divide both these by 2. So I'll do 2 divided by 2, and I'll do 8 divided by 2. Oh, wrong thing. And then we'll do 8 divided by 2. So those will give me my new numerators, and then I'll just type them in the box. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So my equivalent fraction to 2/8 is 1/4. And that's what we're doing. Over here, depending on what software you're using, if you're just on Google Slides, you will not be able to write like this, which is why you will need a scratch sheet of paper in order to do this work right here, and then you'll just type your answer in these boxes. Make sure that your work, you are taking pictures of it and you are attaching it to the assignment, so that way I know that you are actually working through these problems. Let's look at our second one. We've got 5/10. We did 5/10 yesterday, right? We determined that 5/10 was a fraction that could be simplified, right? Because when I'm thinking about 5, 5 is a prime number, right? So 5 can only really be divided by 5, right? When I'm coming up with my T-charts, I know that 1 times 5 is the only way to get 5. Well, 10, I know that I can do 1 times 10 and get 10, but I can also do 2 times 5. So 5 is going to be 5 and 10's greatest common factor. So I can do 5 divided by 5 to get my new numerator. And I'll do 10 divided by 5 to get my new denominator. Well, 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So that means that 5/10 is equivalent, it is equal to 1/2 when I simplify it. Here's another trick for knowing 1/2. Well, 5 is half of 10, so that means it's 1/2. Anytime my numerator is half of my denominator, it's 1/2. So just keep that in mind. So like 10/20. 10 is half of 20, so it'd be 1/2, right? So that's another trick for making 1/2s really easy to spot. So that is what we are doing on our assignment today. We just did 2 of them together. There's 14 left for y'all to do. Like I said, depending on what software you're using, you may or may not be able to write on these slides. If you cannot, make sure you're doing the work on a scratch sheet of paper, taking a picture of it, attaching it to the assignment when you turn it in, so that way you get full credit for the assignment. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to check our work when we meet back up again later on today and discuss more about simplifying fractions. Let me know if y'all need anything, and have a fantastic day, guys. Bye.